lot of things get off the market when it comes to federal investments. So that will come up later. We did pass appropriations in the last two buckets that we'll get to later. Next. So I know many of you are here for this. It's just awful. So I believe very strongly in Israel as its right to defend itself as a democracy. One of the reasons I've gone there and defended it for years is they're trying to live out of democracy. But I don't believe with Israel right or wrong, just like I don't believe in America right or wrong. If you disagree with the government, you disagree, you go to the ballot box, you legally, peacefully protest if you have to, but you work within the system. So can you let me finish? This is how it works. Well, that time we have a difference of opinion. And I may be wrong, but the way to communicate that to me and convince me is, in my opinion, just being respectful of one another. But what's happened there is wrong. It's totally wrong what the Netanyahu president, what the government has done. And I know a lot of demonstrations in the Capitol and watch people and talk to people. This is shared by a majority of my sense is the Israeli public. So what has happened in Gaza has got to stop. It's got to stop. People getting killed in war is not acceptable. What happened on October 7th isn't acceptable, but my view is the way to peace is to hold people accountable, get the hostages back, go back to...
Should Hamas be eliminated
So if you're going to disrupt, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Legally, I have the authority to do that. If you don't leave, I can have you arrested for trespass. And I don't want to do that, but I just I agree with you. So but how we get there, I do think we've got to get back to a conversation where people want to live at peace, knowing the history, knowing the challenges, but we have to have a ceasefire. We have to have a ceasefire today. What a ceasefire mean, but what I have stood for all along is let's get back to Qatar and do negotiations that free the hostages and also free people who were in prison and incarcerated in Israel. So let's invoke never forget to the point where we can talk about holding people accountable who did things that were illegal on international law, whether it was by Hamas or by Israelis. Hold them accountable. And then get back to the table about how we get back to what we've agreed to historically. Not everybody, but a two-state solution where people can live side by side in peace. No.
Empty words. Please mean action on these words.
Okay, I'm gonna get to that.
Get out.
Please, come on. Deep breath, everybody. All right, next. So I voted for the two appropriation bills. These are controversial. There was $3 billion out of almost $1.3 trillion a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that go to Israel. 22 Democrats voted against it. I was very close to voting against it. We needed a supermajority, so we needed 180 votes because we were working under the timeline that if we didn't get this passed, the government was going to shut down on the Monday of the Friday that we got it passed. So I voted for this, even though we went back and checked. I've never said that I wouldn't vote for support for Israel, but I have said that if this continues, and the president had this conversation with the prime minister during news releases today, that we would change and put conditions on that. So I've told many of you that I would want conditions on any funding. It comes in a separate bill. This is part of what happens in the legislative bodies. This was a yes or no on $1.3 trillion. There was a lot in there I didn't like because it was negotiated between the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership in the Senate and ours and the President of the United States. So in a $1.3 trillion budget, with us facing shutting down the government on Monday, on a Friday, I decided to vote for it because I want people to get paid who are going to work, TSA, park rangers, federal employees. So that was my decision. I came close. If you watch the actual film, you can see me talking to some of my colleagues in the well on the floor. This was from my view, more Democrats voted for this than Republicans, because a lot of Republicans felt like Speaker Johnson compromised too much for this. So we'll see what happens with whether he remains Speaker when we go back on Tuesday. But I thought it was, under the circumstances, a reasonable compromise. And it's also because of the agreement that the President and the former Speaker McCarthy and the Democratic leadership agreed to 5 months ago, that we were going to set a cap on spending, and then we were going to spread that money around. But one of the things I'm very enthusiastic about are the things I talked about before, that I put a lot of effort into: education, early education, Pell Grants, and also the National Institutes for Health and the American Cancer Institute. We actually increased funding for that. Many of you know I'm a survivor of stage 4 cancer. I started as Cancer Survivors Network. I was just over at UCSF yesterday. Those grants go out to extend people's lives and improve people's lives. 15 years ago, my oncologist told me that if I was diagnosed 15 years ago, I would have had a 2-year life expectancy. Now, because of investments the American public largely has made in the National Institutes for Health and their affiliated agencies, I can have a normal lifespan. Very important, in the context of how these things are done legislatively. They shouldn't be done this way. They should be separated out by subject area. But in this circumstance, because of the urgency that the majority party created, I thought it was important that we get this out, get people paid, take what we got in compromise. If we killed the bill, I think we would have gotten less for the programs that we support. And I don't think we would have ended up taking that $3 billion out, and I'm not sure it would have been the right thing. Now, we have another appropriations bill that the Senate has approved for, I think the number is $90 billion. The Speaker hasn't decided to bring to the floor yet, and we'll see if we go back, for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. Of that is $60 billion. Most of that goes to Ukraine. There's $14 billion for Israel. So that would be what kind of conditions would we want on those, given what's happening?
Stop killing people. That's the condition.
Arrest her.
Yeah, maybe stop killing people.
Arrest her.
Maybe stop killing people. That's right.
Hamas.
Palestine.
Please.
From Hamas.
Please. What we want is peace. I hope everybody wants that.
Well, we
We
do.
want the peace.
We do want
We want to
peace.
live as a one.
We want to protect innocent people, and we want peace. That's the goal that I'm working on. And
Yeah, what about the 400 that were slaughtered when partying?
You correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this in the Middle East is 3,000 years as far as we
Right.
know. So there's a lot of history, and we're
Right.
trying, and we're
Including the pogroms in the 1930s.
Arrest her. Arrest her. Arrest her.
all right. This is not this doesn't work.
That's the bill that you signed. Didn't you see the trespassing? And it punishes Palestine. Yes.
Get the people out.
Just start a petition.
Be quiet.
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave, man. Let me finish. We'll get to the questions. If worse comes to worse, I'm just gonna have to suspend this and we'll do it, continue it virtually. So if I, man, you're gonna have to stop. Please.
To bring UNRWA back.
Be quiet.
UNRWA is a criminal entity. UNRWA is filled with terrorists.
I understand the emotions. I mean, I don't completely, I acknowledge that. But I'm trying to be empathetic to the situation. All right, so next. All right, somewhere in there was UNRWA. So, let me explain the UNRWA situation. There is no direct funding to UNRWA. We actually increased the funding to $25 billion globally, and the agreement with the State Department with us, Democrats, was there would be more money going to Gaza for humanitarian aid. So we have to hold the administration accountable for that, because that's part of the reasons I voted for it and told the administration I would vote for it, and it was a tight vote there. So you're right, but there are also issues with UNRWA. So we have to work those through. But the most important thing to me, is to make sure that we're still getting that humanitarian aid and more in so civilians. Famine, nobody's. I want to help. I'm not apologizing, but I'm trying to explain how you get things done as a legislator. So I know it's frustrating, but and I accept the fact that you may disagree with me. So, all right, next. Oh wait, just the last one. This is sort of a boilerplate of everything I just talked about. Last one is just our contact information, so people watching online, if you want to contact us, or some people here, these are our 3 offices. I'll stop.
Send the congressman away if we don't. We can't have a conversation and conduct a town hall in the way that the congressman has mentioned that he has hosted more town halls than any other member of Congress, and he wants to be able to be here to have a great conversation with his constituents. It is one of the things that gives us the most. Standing up here earlier, I neglected something very important, and so I'm going to do a very brief shift before I get to these questions. Thank you to those who have submitted questions. I have a large stack, and I can confidently not agree that we'll be able to, or sorry, I can confidently state that we will not be able to get through all of these. That said, if we have your contact information on these questions, we will be back in touch with you to respond to each and every one. So the beauty of these question cards is we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get their question answered, and we will get back to you if we do not get to them this evening in the event. Additionally, I neglected to acknowledge we have some electeds in the room today, and so I want to be able to take the opportunity to be able to acknowledge the electeds that we know are here, and if I do not say your name, please raise your hand, and we'd like to acknowledge you as well. So first, I'd like to say thank you to Jill Ray from Supervisor Anderson's office. You're still here. You can stand up and give a wave. She's over there. Thank you for attending. And then my apology, because I am reading handwriting, so not only for this particular item, but also for the questions. As mentioned, if I have a hard time reading your handwriting, I will do my very best for pronunciation in addition to reading your question. But Doug, is it Reuter, former congressman, if you could stand and wave as well. We thank you for attending this evening. Yes. Thank you so much for attending this evening. Did I miss anyone? Do we have any additional electeds that might have snuck by our team as we started? If so, feel free to grab a staff member and let us know. Thank you so much. So that being said, I will go ahead and get started. I've been handed these in the order in which we received them, and so I will do my very best. So the first question is from Naftali Neverez. My apologies if I mispronounced that. It says, thank you, Rep. Desaulnier, for asking for ceasefire. Question 1, why are you sending bombs and my tax money to support war crimes committed by Israel? And what is the red line for the U.S. to stop funding the war crimes committed by Israel?
I don't do pledges because life changes. I haven't done pledges for a long time in politics, so there is a red line. Right now, I would say the red line is we need the immediate ceasefire, and we need to go back to what we were negotiating at the very minimum when we were successfully negotiating Israeli hostages release and exchange for Palestinian people who are incarcerated. So that's sort of where it is. Just like the President said today, what I said, I don't think compete with the President of the United States, but I think I was trying to figure out, I was in the top 30 Democrats who called for a ceasefire. I didn't sign the Bush bill, the Cory Bush bill, because it didn't refer to the hostages in October October 7th. I think it's important we
Yeah. Bring them home.
So it's time to de-escalate, in my view, but also hold people accountable on both sides. And the way we get that is a ceasefire. And I wouldn't vote for, if that bill that I mentioned in the Senate came over right now with no conditions, I wouldn't vote for it. So, but I want to be honest too, that like I tried to explain in the omnibus bill, these can be complicated for reasons. I'm not excusing responsibility. You can still disagree with me, but I'd like you to explain the conditions of when you vote for things. And then you can hold me accountable.
Excellent. The next question is from Jenna Abbott. Thank you for your recent letter to President Biden calling on him to reassess military funding to Israel as it violates U.S. laws by blocking U.S. humanitarian aid entry and your words to condition aid as Israel continues its massacre of Palestinians. Will you vote against future military funding and weapons to Israel, no matter in a standalone bill or packaged with other funding?
One thing, similar to the previous one, I don't want to be too redundant, but I did sign a letter led by Congressman Pocan, who's one of my best friends from Wisconsin, today because of the humanitarian workers who were killed yesterday. We sent a letter that a group of us signed to the president saying, until we found out who's accountable for this, we should also consider conditions on any kind of funding. So.
Excellent. The next question is for Libby Eppinga. Thank you, Libby Eppinga. Thank you for your support in the Cancer Care Planning and Communications Act. What are future plans for cancer care?
Thank you for the question. So I have a couple bills that I've worked with the cancer groups. Two of them we were talking to the people at UCSF about yesterday because they do such an amazing job. They have a partnership with John Muir now down here. John Muir just opened a fabulous center. A lot of it's communication. So we want to do, one of my bills, cancer care, working with the cancer community, is allowing doctors to be able to bill Medicare and Medicaid for an hour of time as they prepare to tell the patients what the treatment plan is and what the diagnosis is. And also emphasizing more nurse practitioners or nurse navigators who are culturally competent, so people who are multilingual. We know for people who are who get cancer, but also other serious diseases, their family only hear 1 in 4 words that they're hearing when they get the diagnosis. So it's important that we have experts and culturally competent people who are multilingual to be able to communicate to the family what the diagnosis is, what the treatment plan is, and what the financial situation is. Contra Costa County, we're lucky. They do a very good job at this. And I've been in meetings where people are explaining to people who have English as a second language, who have very severe diagnosis, and they're being explained, and it makes a world of difference. So those two things. The other big thing is spending more money at the National the American Cancer Institute, a remarkable institution. The drug that keeps me alive started actually in the Department of Defense during World War I for leukemia, but most of that basic research happened from American taxpayers. One of the frustrating things about it is my prescription is one of the 5 drugs that we passed laws to require the first tranche of negotiations with pharmaceutical companies. Now this is a drug that keeps lots of people alive. It started with American taxpayers' money, 90% of the basic research, but then Johnson & Johnson took it over, and now it's generic, so it's wider. But when I started, it was almost $500 a day, the requirement to keep me alive. Wow. Most people don't have a deductible for that. In Australia, it was $37 a day, even though we created it. In Europe, it was $90 a day. We brought the CEOs, and we're in charge of the 3 largest pharmaceutical companies, into an oversight hearing, and we were able to ask them. And basically, this investment in research for cancer and other things in the United States that extends people's lives and quality of life, we've been subsidizing cheaper prices in other parts of the world. Because, and one of the answers I got from pharmaceutical companies was, why do you charge so little over there and so much here? And the answer was, because you let us. So we're not letting them anymore. We still can make a reasonable profit, and there's a really good story, I think, in the New York Times today about research and development and sort of truth testing where that happens. The majority of it actually happens at the National Institute for Health in the United States. So pharmaceutical companies do come up with innovative ideas, but most of it happens with smaller companies, like in tech. So we want, as I told the chairman of John, your investments should be high risk, high reward. You've got too many low risk, high reward. So they take a generic drug, or they take a drug like mine, change it a little bit to get through the copyright laws, and then they charge whatever they can. Sometimes it's very monopolistic until you get generics.
The next question is from Saida Assad. Rep. Desaulnier, you called for a ceasefire and conditioning of aid in October. Yet 6 months later, when the population is facing starvation and humanitarian aid workers, doctors, babies, children are still being killed. You voted yes to a spending package, which again sent money to Israel. How can we reconcile your actions with your words?
I've tried to explain that, and we've had meetings regularly, so I'm happy to have more meetings, and you can continue to question me, and I'll try to explain myself. And if I'm wrong, you can convince me to do it otherwise. So that's why. But the red line for me, if there is a red line, is in the upcoming Senate bill that is now over in the Assembly.
Sit down! Sit down! Sit down!
Hold on.
Write a card! Submit a card!
I'll come back to you at the end. But let's just try to follow the process, please. Look at, to be respectful, everybody's way.
Just sit
Sit
down.
down!
Okay,
Go get out.
the next question is from David Lackner. Why is POTUS entering to the fringe left wing and abandoning Israel?
Yeah!
I don't know how to take that because there's a scorecard in Congress, and according to them, it's progressive punch. I don't know how they figured it out, but I'm the most ninth liberal progressive member of Congress, so I don't take any offense at that. But I'm a former Republican, so it's time to correct it. What I said originally is, this is a big country, and democracy has a lot of divergences. I know this sounds, I'm not trying to patronize, but I knew this intellectually, but when I became a member of Congress, I became much more aware of how different the country is. And it's not different in the sense that we have to fight one another, but we have to respect people that have different world perspectives, and then try to, this way, understand them and get them to understand us. And in our best moments, as somebody who feels I still believe in America as a shining city in the hill, that Winthrop said was left. If you know the story, we can talk about it, but we have these kind of environments. And then we're a model for other people around the world to be a democracy. When we don't, then we become chaos. And right now, there's people around the world who want authoritarian government. And they're all around the world. And if we give in to them, we've just got to keep accepting the fact that people are different. So yes, I'm a progressive, but I work with Republicans all the time. I think I reflect this too. So I'm reflecting the majority of people who have voted for me to be in office. I'm not right all the time, but when I go to somebody like my colleague from North Carolina, who's a friend, a lot of you have heard this quote, I love this quote. She used to be a superintendent of school, Virginia Fox, who's the chair of the education committee. She introduces me to new Republican members of the committee as, this is Desaulnier, he's our favorite socialist from San Francisco. I say the same thing, I said, Virginia, by your standards, I'm in Trotsky yet. But we respect her because she reflects the people she represents, and that's how it's got to work. Sorry if I got it.
So the next question, and again, thank you to allow us to get through as many questions as possible. The next question is from Alana Kleinberger. What is our district doing about the rising anti-Semitism, especially in the schools? And what can our government do to ensure that if there is a ceasefire, it is like it was on 10/7/23?
get people to accept the fact that we're different. I told, some of you have heard this story, one of the first times I went to Israel, we were in Golan Heights, and a few of us were talking to a retired member of the general from IDF, and it was just informal. I said, well, how do we get to where we're not? And he simply said, we're going to have to find a way, after all these years and centuries, to learn to live together. And I know that sounds, but I thought that was very profound. So when it comes to bias and prejudice on either side, we've got to stand up for the fact that you are individuals. We all have individual stories and backgrounds, and you've got to respect everyone's journey and not vilify people. And so you can't equivocate on it. You just got to say America's about people who are different, whether they're African Americans, Hispanic, or they're people who hate people, Jewish people. We all have to say that's not what America's about. We have a history. We're trying to overcome it. We're not perfect, but we don't accept it. So to answer your question, more forceful is it's not acceptable. And we've got to tell kids that's not acceptable. We were just out at Loma Vista Elementary School earlier today. It's an elementary school in Brentwood, and one of the teachers, who's Arabic, was telling me she does a class for third graders out there, very diverse school, explaining the history of their culture. And I got chills, because that's what America should be about, is explaining to kids early on, not making judgments, but saying this is how we all got here. And this is how it's genetics and environment, but we have to respect that.
Question.
So I was looking at the time, we likely have time for one, if not two more questions. So this is from Joe Felcher. The status of the living hostages is essential. What can our government do to influence the Red Cross to become more involved?
Yeah.
You know, honestly, I don't know, but I'll find out. The Red Cross is a well-respected arbiter of impartiality, and at least from my experience, maybe not from yours. But we want that. So, but I'm happy to get more. If you want to follow up with us and explain to me your opinion of the Red Cross, or where we can go to get those impartial folks to give the humanitarian aid. I think we all, I would hope that all of us would want to get in a war-torn area to get there.
What about the
They're
hostages' rights?
supposed to visit the hostages, and they're not allowed.
The medication. They didn't get their medication.
We never met the hostages. They
The
never
Red
met the
Cross.
hostages.
The Red
The
Cross.
Red Cross never met the hostages.
You need to explain it more to me, because honestly, I
Okay,
don't understand.
well, we can talk later.
Okay.
So, do we have time for one more? Okay. This one's from Carolyn Chang. Please, it's a long one. So thanks for your recent letter to Biden to reassess military funding to Israel, as it violates U.S. law by blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza. Enforcement of this law, Section 620I of the Foreign Assistance Act, entails suspending military funding to Israel. Will you pledge to vote against military funding and weapons to Israel, no matter in a standalone bill or funding package, to stop fueling this genocide with our tax dollars?
There is no genocide.
No genocide.
It's a war.
Sorry. Sorry if I got the limitation.
Was genocide.
So, the question here, so I think you're referring to, there's an ability, right now, it's considering sales of F-16s, I think. Is that what you're referring to? 15s. So there's a process where Congress can question that. There's discretion within the administration in the law, but there's also a process that deals with the amount of the effort. It goes through the Foreign Affairs Committees of both houses, and that's where it's being discussed right now. And I think there's been, you can go online, I think the Times and the Post has written stories about it, maybe the Wall Street Journal. So that's a legitimate question. But I'm not at the level of detail that I can say whether I commit one or the other.
So that being said, Congressman, would you like to answer one more, or would you like to?
No.
Okay.
Normally we go a little bit. Normally we go a little bit longer.
Sit down and
but
put
we
a
do have
card.
the facility till 7:30, 7:45. And I want to go to 6 to leave. But as people start to leave, I have an intrepid I have 15 staff people between 3 offices. We'll do the best we can to answer all these. And I will do videos of answering your questions individually as we get time to. So when you leave, if you have more, I don't want to put more pressure on my staff, but we'll do the best we can, and we work with experts on the communities of jurisdiction, so Florida.
So one more question and then we will wrap up. If you would like to stay for this last. So this last question is for George
Rabutsky.
Rivitsky, thank you. What will the congressman do to ensure the safety of Jewish students and teachers in local schools when there are genocidal chants from the river to the sea and intimidation of Jews happening in the schools?
Sit down and be quiet.
People, we've been asked this question in large part, so we'll just have to keep working on it. I'm happy to you to talk how we can work here specifically with the superintendents of education, the teachers, the PTA, and others. I'd love to be part of that. I'd love to see if we can get some federal funds so that we can work in a way so that for young people to be able to get the experience that we want them to get, which is tolerance and empathy and understanding for people of different cultures and backgrounds. So I'm going to thank you all. We will do follow-up. We meet regularly. Given my time, I can over-talk to you. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Put it on the card and wait.
We want to let the staff go home and the veterans who are here on their own time. Thank you all for coming.